Welcome to Mormon Book Reviews, where an evangelical encounters the restoration. I'm your host, Steven Pynakker, and I'm very excited to have my good friend David Boice of 52 Churches in 52 Weeks back on the program. How you doing today, sir?
Steve, doing good. Great to see you a little bit better from the past couple of weeks. We definitely missed your spirit and the energy you brought in Independence a few weeks ago. Just hoping to see you kind of on the mend and coming back stronger than ever.
Yeah, just keep me in your prayers. I'm still working through this whole thing with the tinnitus, but it's okay. We're gonna get through this. And yeah, I really do. I did miss out on joining you at the Book of Mormon rally, and I hear that it was a great success this year. And of course, I was supposed to go to Utah to speak at Rob Meldrum's conference, and unfortunately, I was unable to make it out to that either. And so, yeah, this has really nailed me pretty good. But we're not here to talk about me and my tinnitus. We're here to talk about this interesting developed 3 weeks ago. I'm taping this on Saturday, May 4th. And right about this time, 3 weeks ago, or about an hour or two from now, 3 weeks ago, you got baptized into the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Now, of course, here you are, a lifelong Protestant who wrote
Mhm.
the book 52 Churches in 52 Weeks, and then went back and revisited it through your YouTube channel, 52 Churches. And you went to over 100 different churches in America, many of them Protestant, many of them evangelical. And part of the reason why you did this whole project going on like 10 years ago now is because you were looking for a church. That was the whole point. And you ended up in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, which 2 years ago you didn't even know who Joseph Smith was. You thought it was John Smith, or whatever. And
Joe Smith, I was my first question was, why don't you just call him Joe Smith? That's what I was thinking. So, 2 years later,
it's been a
how did
slow
this happen? You know?
Yeah, well, I just, a couple years ago when I first had you on, you were just had maybe 1,000 subscribers. You were just kind of getting started. You just started getting on some people's radar screens with your first visit to a local LDS ward,
Mhm.
and you didn't really know, like I said, you didn't know anything about the church or anything. And you've been on this journey with, in one sense, with me too. You and I have become very
Mhm.
good friends and have had many, many conversations with each other. And I think, David, I think it's safe to say that I don't think you've ever heard me bash the church at all.
Right.
Uh, and also, let's just get this out in the open here. You
Mhm.
This was not a plan. You were not a plant put in by the church to do this, right? You
No,
just
no. I've heard some conspiracy theories out there. Um, and like it, I have this with the background with the book, like I have everything dated. It's like if you want to look up, different sermons or like everything's dated, you can look it up through that. You know me, like, I was a big craft beer drinker. So to give that up now has been quite the change. So um yeah, I don't know where that's coming from, but people like to jump at conclusions, and
it's so
I don't
funny
know what
because
else to say.
it's so funny because I was on Reddit and people were like, I knew it. This is a plant. And I hopped right in there and read it and said, listen, guys, this is not true. I even sent you the link to let you know that this was kind of the conspiracy theory that was developing in the ex-Mormon community.
Yeah.
Hopefully nipped it in the bud. But
I didn't do all these church visits 9, 10 years ago, not visit the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And then secretly I was planting all along to be this lifelong Protestant that eventually joined the church. Like that's
yeah,
the planning of that would have been absolutely insane. So no, I don't know what else I can say.
so one thing that was so weird was 3 weeks ago, right about this time,
Mhm.
I decided I was going to post our interview on the Utah Interfaith Forum channel, which I had intended on doing months ago and never got
Yeah.
around to it. And for whatever reason, I decided to post it. And we figured right about the time that I posted that video was right about the same time that you were baptized into the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, which to me was like very eerie, like almost like, okay, there's obviously some kind of providential sign there.
Yeah, because I
And
because I didn't even tell you about this,
no,
and there's a big part of me where I had a lot of fear, um, explaining it to people that were close to me, even to you, because we both come from that evangelical Protestant background, and this was something that I had been mulling over for quite some time. And it was like, this is between me and God, you know, and I can't let anyone else influence my decision on it.
Well, I even asked you, I said, David, because I had went to you before and said, David, if you are thinking of converting, please give me a call first. And I said, you didn't call me because you were kind of worried that maybe I would talk you out of it. You had mentioned that to me.
Yeah,
Yeah. And I want to say I would not have, if we would have had that conversation, it would not have been like, okay, I'm going to bash the LDS church. So if I want to
yeah,
defend my faith, tearing down another faith is the weakest, worst way you could possibly do it, and shows how bad
right.
weak your faith is. In other words, if you can't defend your faith by talking about its merits and the positivities of it, instead you go and tear down another person's faith, then guess what? Your faith is very weak. It's a very small faith. My
Yeah,
argument, I would have merely just stated the some of the positive things about Protestantism and evangelicalism, and would have stated the case that way. But I would have never gone to you and say, well, don't join that church because they do secret satanic rituals in the temple and all this
yeah,
kind of nonsense, all the garbage that they talk about in
right.
apologetic circles. But again, if you want to do good apologetics, um, talk about the merits of your faith and don't go tearing into other people. So first of all, I wouldn't have torn into it, but I
Yeah,
understand. It's like because I got it. I understood why you felt like this is between me and God, and you didn't really want any third party or other interference. I understand that totally, David, and I get that.
yeah. No, I appreciate it. Thanks, Steve.
So all of a sudden this was like a last minute thing, like just a few days before you apparently you had seen a video on YouTube from a pretty prominent evangelical that kind of set things in motion that made you
Yeah,
decide to get baptized. Maybe talk a little bit about that.
yeah. Well, I had even before that, like, completing the 52 churches in 52 weeks, the second round, there was a big influence, not just with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, but all the different Book of Mormon believing churches I had attended. I know it sounds cliche, but it's just there was a different spirit inside those churches that I felt. And as you know, for the last year, I was still making some trips, and the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints still really interested me, especially with those temple open houses. And I'd done all these church visits, but there was just something different, especially with my first temple open house in Arkansas. It just even though I didn't really learn much about the temples because I was just too introverted to ask any questions, like you could tell the example all over was just different. I mentioned that video. It was like I was walking into the twilight zone. But I was kind of wondering to myself, maybe I'm walking out of the twilight zone. It was just different from anything else I had experienced on such a almost like a spiritual wavelength, so to speak. So the more temple open houses I would attend, like I started to see like, I'm getting growth from one foundation, and then just this peace and protection, especially with the Manti temple open house. So there was that building inside of me. But then I think as well, I went to Crossroads Church in Cincinnati. That was the church that had that Super Bowl sermon skit where they kicked the Bible. It wasn't the Bible, but it was something else. And, it just kind of started, things just started to move, you know? And so with the baptism, I was planning to do so. I just didn't have a date. And I think when that prominent evangelical YouTuber, and it's like, when I started my YouTube channel, like I signed up for his YouTube beginners program. Like I have that much respect and admiration for that gentleman. And then to see this YouTube video posted with this association of the Book of Mormon on the thumbnail, this weird kind of like um, look for the body language, and then combined with satanic and pervasive. And early on, like I haven't watched the whole video, I just watched the first 10 seconds, and then to have Hitler brought up and all the word associations with that. And as I do all these different church visits, like that was kind of the final straw, I think, for me. Um, one thing that it's funny, like from my first round of 52 and 52 with the book, we joke because I didn't do much research, but for that week I was going to do a Seventh-day Adventist church, and I learned, oh, that's seventh day, oh, Saturday. When you go to so many church services, you just expect it to be on Sunday. So in the book, I kind of mentioned um, with their website, they had posted something on John 3:17. I'm like, that's interesting. Seems like so many churches kind of focus on John 3:16. And as I was at that Baptist church, and it's strange because I would listen to so many different preachers. Like I attended sermons with Joel Osteen, T.D. Jakes, apologist Oz Guinness. I went to see Jim Bakker's son, Jay Bakker, who is a church of a very liberal, left-leaning type of church. Try to get a wide variety of different pastors, and yet from that church visit, one of the most memorable quotes was from this 4-year-old girl. And so they have all these little 4-year-olds, 5-year-olds come up. They state their Bible passages. One is given John 3:16. It's like, yeah, that's a T-ball passage. But then the very last one had John 3:17. And it's like, what is John 3:17? I don't even know. And this little girl struggled. She couldn't say it. And her instructor just kind of helped her through it. So for God did not send his son into the world to condemn the world, but in order that the world might be saved for him. And I think one struggle that I see is not so much in American churches, but just that outside influence that's infiltrating the church. And with members and trying to sharpen up their knowledge and their theology. And as a result, we're condemning other people. And I think for that, that was kind of like one of the final straws because I've seen so much of that from my background. And then when I would attend LDS ward visits, there's testimonies. There's so much about Jesus Christ, how to help your neighbor, the great commandment, love God, love your neighbor. And I felt like maybe I've been losing that from my, previous lifelong Protestant background.
Hmm. Hmm. That's I I I I tell people that um it's an indictment in many ways on American Christianity that you went to all these different churches and couldn't find a community. And I'm not, this is the thing. We can talk about doctrine, we can talk about theology,
Mhm.
and we can talk about the differences, which I've done. People who like to be critical
Yeah.
of me obviously haven't been actually paying attention to anything that I do or say, because I do differentiate between Orthodox Christianity and Restorationism. But the thing is that really at its core is within the church, it's a sense of community, a
Mhm.
people, and a community that's not talking about maybe necessarily talking about Christ. Of course, we want to talk about Christ, but the church that's following Christ and following
Yeah.
his principles and enacting them. And so for you, in many ways, you saw on the within the context of a church community something in the Latter-day Saint church, particularly with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, that you were not seeing in many conventional churches. Is that correct?
Um, to a certain extent,
Okay.
because there's a lot where, especially with LDS, you have to cut through a lot to kind of see the pearl inside.
Mm.
Because there's a lot of anti stuff that's out there, both from a post-Mormon perspective, and it's like even with post-Mormons, like I have a lot of empathy and sympathize with them because, like, to a certain extent, like there is beauty into the LDS world, and to have that void after leaving it, but I was trying to understand parts of that. Um, so that was one thing that was holding me back. But then you also have, the evangelical side where it's just the insulting, the insults, the cult, false prophets, all that kind of stuff. But, you know, it's not like many people throw that back at the Protestant evangelical world, because there's plenty of issues there too, especially with many fallen pastors, especially in the last decade. Um, but yeah, I think like we're all a collection of our personal experiences, and I can understand easily, you know, many people criticizing my decision. It's like, you went to over 100 churches and you picked that one, and that's coming from a collection of their personal experience. So even with my conversion, it's like, I'm not, even with my channel, like I'm not pushing, you know, a particular religion. I'm trying to be as open-minded, raw, honest, and authentic as I can be with any kind of church video that I put out there. Um, but but yeah.
Hmm. Yeah.
So,
So I
oh, one last thing I should
oh
also
sure.
mention. I do remember the very first time I was in Independence. It was at the Visitors Center,
Hmm.
and you know, nobody knew who I was. I just kind of walk in and had one of the senior missionaries kind of show me around. And I was just with the senior missionary, and then like a bus, maybe it was BYU students, I'm not sure, came in, and I could overhear the person that was leading that tour. And one of the questions that they asked was, you know, who is head of the church? Almost like it was a trick question, because I'm sure many people would have said President Nelson, but obviously the answer was Jesus Christ. And it was interesting because I was collecting every single bulletin of the churches I went to. And there was only one bulletin that I received where, you know, in the acknowledgments of, you know, who the pastor is, who the organist is, who the elders are, like there was only one church I came across that had at the very top, head of the church, Jesus Christ. And that was Fort Snelling Memorial Chapel outside Minneapolis. So like that was something that also was kind of stuck in my mind, was that focus on Jesus Christ right from the beginning stages. And I think there is, I wouldn't say it's lost in evangelical worlds, but it was just an interesting observation to see that.
So you had mentioned that you had thought that you were going to get baptized for a while, and then things happened that caused you to do it. How
Yeah.
long have you felt that you were going to be to get baptized into the church?
There was a number of things that kind of that influenced the decision. It wasn't anything, because like even a year ago, you know, I'd had friends. It's like, oh, are you turning Mormon? And it's like, no, I'm not going to do that. Um, it was a continuation, and I think especially with you know, church members that would reach out to me that were very positive, that were so convicted in their beliefs, that had an idea. Um, I was usually on week, like at first it was bi-weekly missionary calls, and then eventually we kind of ramped up to weekly phone calls. And it was good to see that too, because there is such a strong personal touch that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints operates from. I thought that was interesting. Evangelical churches, it's usually just emails, coffee mugs, free gifts. There was one church that I try to connect where, um, you know, I would walk up to the visitors desk every church I'd go to. There was one where it's like, yeah, hey, you can meet the pastor in 6 weeks in this meeting, you know? So there, I think from an evangelical audit, I guess, there's so much focus on growth right now, and growth isn't a bad thing. You know, someone was counting the number of people in the New Testament when Jesus was preaching, you know, it's like, hey, 5,000 people were here. So that's important. I think there is a concern with the trajectory of things where as churches get bigger, it's hard. Like if Jesus is going to find you as the one in the 99, it's like more churches are going for you as a one in the 999. And, you know, obviously Christ can do that. But when it comes to pastors, I thought I saw something where it's like the word pastor is Latin for shepherd or something like that. It's changing where now pastors are actually just speakers. And it's very easy to get lost as a lot of these churches, like this corporate side, the Walmart like type gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And yet, um, I think there are a lot of people that do feel lost. There's I kind of mentioned my video with my baptism video about Francis Chan. He was a prominent megachurch speaker in California, had a church of 20,000. I think his church was called Cornerstone Church. And he left that to start up a home church network because it's like, hey, everyone sees me using my spiritual gifts, but everyone's just sitting. They're not using theirs.
Right.
And one thing that LDS did increase my curiosity was, you do the fact like the first Sunday of the month, like everyone can go up and speak about their own testimony, their own relationship with Christ. And that was something that was very different as well.
So I wanted to ask you, of course, when you started this journey, you had just known about the main branch, Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. But then
Mhm.
part of your journey included going and visiting other churches of the Restoration. Now, of course,
Yeah,
you spoke at the Book of Mormon rally, which represented a lot of different groups. Tell me just in general, even like, I guess the question would be, why did you decide to go with the Utah-based one and maybe not one of the other groups? Or do you feel like, I mean, just
yeah,
maybe to talk, maybe it was convenience or whatever, but what drew you in particular to the Utah-based branch?
yeah. That's a good question. And a big part of me too is like I don't necessarily feel like a big reason why, like I felt like the baptism was almost a baptism into the restoration because to me, like the Book of Mormon was translating differently into, the restoration churches, like the Church of Jesus Christ with the Bickertonite group and the Stringite group. Even recently, I'll have a future video on the Hedrickite Church. And oh, it was too bad we couldn't attend together on that. But like I went inside that church, it was probably one of the best sermons I've ever heard. And even if you're a Protestant, you'd be like, this is a great sermon. And then at the very end, they bring up Elma and Mosiah. And I'm sure anyone else would just be like, wait a minute, from that Protestant background. So to me, it just felt like I was seeing the Book of Mormon translate in a different way inside to the hearts and minds and souls of those churches differently. And so like for my baptism, it's like my missionaries told me I could pick out two hymns. So I picked out a Songs of Zion hymn and another church song that we had at JWHA with the Remnant Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, just because it sounded exactly, what I was feeling with the symbolism involved in the decision as well. So yeah, so
Hmm.
very, very different. So it almost was like, I don't think I would have been baptized into LDS if it wasn't for the other Book of Mormon believing churches, because it was just, it gave me more evidence, I think,
Hmm.
about there's something more here. It's not just one church, it's multiple that have this as their foundation as well.
Interesting. So you're looking at the restoration in its broadest perspective, kind of
Right.
like how I look at the restoration. Like you got Protestants, you have Catholics, you have Orthodox, and you have Restorationists. Like they're almost like this
Hmm.
own, subgroup of,
Yeah.
churches. And okay, I think that makes a lot of sense to me. So you had so at your baptism you had a Songs of Zion from Arlene Buffington's, and then one from a remnant church sung at your. That is fascinating. I get it now.
Yeah.
I think you're looking at yourself as being baptized into the broader restoration, and that's an
Yeah.
interesting way to approach it.
Yeah. And I think for me, like the biggest obstacle and the biggest hurdle I think you have as a Protestant is just to to admit like there's a modern day prophet. That was one I was stuck on forever. Um, and I think over time, like I just have seen, uh, like in my book, like I combined churches 2 through 4. So the third week, I went to an ELCA Lutheran church, and like I'd mentioned previously on the podcast, I grew up Wells, and so in Wells, like there's actual like records where you like the Pope is the Antichrist. That's why I grew up believing. And in that third week, there's two, like it wasn't a sermon, it was like a mock academic debate where one of the pastors was dressed up as Martin Luther, and the other one was dressed up as his right-hand man. I can't remember his name, Philip Melanchthon or something like that. It's a long last name. But I remember the gentleman that was dressed up as Martin Luther kind of said, is the church today in need of reform? And the question that he said was the church is always in need of reform and change. So even though that was one of my earliest church documented visits, one question that I think I gathered from that is how much reform is too much reform, or where does reformation stop?
Hmm. That's an interesting way to look at it. Yeah. And I do feel like sometimes there's a stagnate that churches within the Protestant tradition that they like the idea, the concept of the church always reforming, but unfortunately they're kind of stuck where they're at and they're not budging, which is kind of the
Hmm.
church that you came out of. Like there's a certain type of Lutheranism that they're going to believe in, and they're just stuck there. And I think
Yeah.
sometimes that's kind of a dead end that a lot of churches run into as well. So I just want to
Yeah.
know, um, you've been a member now for 3 weeks. Do you have a
Mhm.
church calling? How are things in your local ward?
Yeah. So I did the Book of Mormon rally. So I'm looking to do an interview for the Aaronic priesthood. I'm still navigating right now, um, because like I kind of had it on my heart to do the baptism, but then I also want to do another 52 churches in 52 weeks. How that's going to work, I'm not sure. But I think after the baptism, like I just had this thought spring in my head where maybe we can do something for people that are struggling. So uh, with this current round of 52 churches, I don't know if it's going to be 52 weeks. It may be 68 weeks. It may be 2 years. I don't know, because I want to be very serious on this covenant path. But at the same point, like if you're going to have 15 minutes of fame, I don't need it. Like if we can do something for some families that are struggling, um, we put up a fundraiser on the channel for St. Jude. With donations, it's going to help out with people who, their childs are in pain. And if we can bring with St. Jude, like they will not bill for treatments, for housing, for food, for travel. Parents can focus on the health of their child. And if I can be a voice for that instead, with these church visits, um, that's what I want to do. If I can represent Christ as much as possible, even despite, there's going to be people that are going to be like, can't believe that, you joined the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I'm trying to bring people to Jesus Christ. And if I can do something on my channel to help out others, I think that is kind of the way to, as best as I can anyway, uh, to help.
Hmm. Well, I know your heart. You have a good heart, David. And I'm really honored to call you a friend. And
Yeah,
it was I was sad. I was a little sad, but I was also totally understanding
I know.
um, why you did it. I don't I don't I don't let me put it this way. I get why you did it, because I definitely know that you and I have both talked about how we have the privileged place to be exposed to the pearls of the restoration. We get to
Yeah.
see a lot of the good that a lot of the critics will never see. And so I can understand. I also think that you and I are just hardwired maybe a little differently too, where I think
Mhm.
I've never joined a church my entire life. you've spent a lifetime looking for a church.
Yeah,
And
and like that changed over time. Like at first I was looking for a church, and then there's a part of me where it's like, well, I do kind of like being this traveling church historian.
mm,
You know, it's interesting. No one else does it, and I like learning about the church history and like the stories inside that no one else really covers, and to kind of present that in a way that's hopefully respectful and kind and helps others, especially in their own faith walk. So, but yeah, it's like this was never intended for me to get baptized, but it's just I couldn't. It was kind of like one of those things where it's like, how long can you kick the tire?
yeah, well,
And
that's true.
like I don't want to be like 5 years later and be like, you should have got baptized.
Mm, mm. So I guess for a lot of people, they just want to know, I guess, how are you doing, like spiritually? Do you feel like that this was spiritually good for you? Did you notice any changes in getting baptized? Are you at peace? I mean, just kind of tell us where you're at right now, spiritually and
Yeah.
mentally.
Well, I mentioned in my video the baptism, like I've done all these church visits, but like, I was baptized as an infant, 21, 22 days old. So to actually go through the baptism process, repent and be baptized was something completely different. I mentioned in the video, I had a lot of fear doing this, and what's going to result of it, because like I'm just like I consume so much content on Christian YouTube, and obviously like a lot of people just like to attack and condemn other people's belief sets. I mean, just look at Dallas Jenkins with The Chosen. Like you have a little deviation, try to bring people to Christ, and then you have very staunch Christian audience that just starts to come and attack. So there was a lot of concern about that because this is a very public announcement. Um, but like I just remember that just a second or two, like I just had that image of Christ's hand reaching through the water as Simon Peter is kind of going down in the water with that leap of faith, and that was an image that I just can't get out of my mind. So I feel peace, I feel protected, I feel his hand as I move forward on this.
Well, I have to say, by the way, any cardinal sightings lately?
Temple lot.
Temple lot.
I'll have a video released very soon, probably after or probably before this interview gets posted. And that was interesting because yeah, I was right on the Temple lot, had a very unique experience where a cardinal was chirping outside my hotel window. And I was like, maybe this is a sign, I'll go to the Temple lot. And sure enough, cardinals would perch in the trees of the Temple lot church overlooking this plot of land that Joseph Smith dedicated to be the temple August 3rd, 1831. So I'm like, is there anything here? Who knows? But had an interesting conversation in that parking lot. So stay tuned for that. Or, take a look at it right now when this interview gets posted.
Yeah, check it out. So, David, thank you so much for joining us today. It's so glad to see you again, and I consider you a good friend. And I look forward to doing future collaborations and uh, and just want to tell you, Godspeed on your journey. I don't it's kind of an awkward place because here I am. You went from team Protestantism or team evangelical to team restoration. Uh, I feel, but we're still brothers, and I feel like that's the important thing is that we're still brothers in Christ.
I appreciate it, Steve. Praying for you.
Thank you. And I'm praying for you too, my brother. Well, folks, leave in the comments what you think about this. It's an interesting story. It's a unique story. It's kind of interesting because, in one sense, I've been kind of documenting. David's been documenting his journey with his engagement these churches, and then he's been coming on this channel, and we've been kind of documenting David's journey into this whole restoration world, which I think is really fascinating. So I just want to thank you so much for giving me the opportunity and the privilege to be part of the story.
Thanks, Steve.
All
You're
right,
the
folks.
best.
Well, there's links in the description for those of you who'd like to support the channel. I couldn't do it without you. For those of you who are financially supporting the channel, don't forget we do have a merch store at mormonbookreviews.com. And remember, the most important thing is this: all the voices of the restoration will be heard here on Mormon Book Reviews.